Hey, folks, welcome to the Accessible Hunter podcast. I'm Greg Trainer along with my co host, Mike Hudson. We're really glad that you're joining us today. Mike and I are going to be talking about some summer activities, some of the things we do outdoors, and really who knows where this podcast is going to take us today. Mike, what's going on in South Carolina, brother?
Hey man, we're just enjoying another day. Last week flew by so doggone fast, and this week looks like it's going to be even faster. But the crazy thing is, man, the weather. I don't know how you guys are looking in PA, but we're under a heat index. Every day is going to be just astronomically hot, and I think they're calling for hundreds all this week here. And then the heat index, I know, Tuesday or Wednesday is going to be like 107. Straight up temperature 100, but then, you add the index and quadriplegics and no sweating, that doesn't work very well. And I've got to finish the pier. So we're going to be outside doing some more work. It's part of the process, man. You know how it goes. That's one of the things a lot of people that probably listen to these podcasts don't understand too is as quadriplegics and people with spinal cord injuries, we can't sweat, but the activities go on and we just have to keep pushing.
Mike, you're exactly right on that. And we have to be a little bit more cautious than the average person, with the heat indexes and the humidity and our exposure outdoors. I know here in PA, it was 91 yesterday. Now, keep in mind, this is the end of June and we're already hitting 90s. And I think today's forecast is for 97 degrees.
Mhm.
And I was out, both days on the weekend. We had some really fun activities. We celebrated the summer solstice with our neighbors and had a campfire at night. And they had a five-piece band. A lot of their friends are musicians, so we had
Yeah.
a lot of guitar music and singing and campfire. And Saturday was just a really great day to be with friends. And then yesterday we were out picking blueberries, so it was nice. But I really had to control how long I was out, go back into the air conditioning, and do
Yeah.
some of the things that you and I have to do in the summer to stay cool and stay hydrated.
It's one of those things, man. It's a fine line. After your injury, I know we've covered this a little bit, not in detail, but after your injury, it's really not the chair that's the problem. It's all the secondary stuff you have to watch, and your spinal cord controls so much, and you don't really think about it when you get an injury. When I broke my neck and they told me I was going to be paralyzed, I'm just thinking. I got to worry about the non-ambulatory part of it, and it's all the secondary stuff. Watch out for pressure. Watch your blood pressure can drop. And it's all that. And then you add in the inability to control and regulate our core temperatures. And so in the wintertime, we're dang near freezing to death. And then in the summertime, you have to run from the heat like you're part vampire. Uh,
Yes, sir.
and so you're constantly ducking and dodging from the sun. But I'd much rather be in the summertime where I can stay half warm.
It for me, my favorite uh, time of the year is in October, not just because of hunting, but that's like the perfect temperature for me. I always find it easier to put clothes on than to take clothes off. So you and I, a lot of times, we'll be wearing a stocking hat, a
Yeah,
wool cap, and maybe a hooded sweatshirt to kind of keep warm. Once your temperature gets high, it's really hard to get it back down.
it is. It is.
Um,
That's one of the struggles, man, is I'm constantly using either I'm running through water and liquid IV and Gatorades and then you got to watch sugar because of UTIs and all that. And so it's a fine line between sanity and just trying to get outdoors and have fun with some activities. But at the same time, we got cooling vest and cooling towels and all that stuff that can help. And Shepherd, I know me and you both went there, and they're really good about misting systems and spray yourself down to simulate sweat. And so it goes into everything else, and that's part of the accessible hunter is just raising awareness. And being able to get outdoors and hunt, fish, be able to get close to animals is one thing. Then you couple in all the extra stuff we have to do just to make sure we're getting out there and we're doing it safely. I love to fish and I love to hunt, but we have to make sure that we're doing it safely. And part of that is educating those that have injuries, the newer ones, and then those that are going to be taking and assisting so that they will be looking out for issues that we may face.
Well, you really turned me on to the cooling vest a couple of years ago. I think you were on a fishing trip down in Florida and
Yeah,
posted a picture, and I was like, man, what is that? It almost looked like body armor, but
right.
it has the gel packs that you freeze in the freezer and then put that around you. And that has made such a difference for me here in PA. I put that vest on. I basically load it up in the front. I don't put any of the gel packs in the back because of pressure
Right.
and, with us not being able to feel. But I put 3 or 4 of those on the front of the vest, and that really helps me stay out a little bit longer. Now, I don't stay out all day, but it helps me stay out a little bit longer, be a little bit more comfortable, especially at like family functions and things like that.
Yeah, I saw it on a work crew. Saw some of the guys and girls that are working outside that are staying out there in the heat all day. Stopped and started talking to somebody, and then of course, you know me, man, that kicked in some research, and I started looking around trying to find the ones that would last longer. And I'm like you, it looks like a tactical vest, but you throw it on, and the gel packs. I tell you, I figured out that if I don't wear an undershirt and I put that vest on, it allows that to make it doesn't make contact, with the body because there's a secondary part of that vest on the inside, so it's not like you have to worry about shearing or anything. But I can throw it on and it keeps me cooler. And you're right, it was that Florida fishing trip that I tried it out the first time, and it was going to be hot. We were in Key West, and your brother's down that way. It gets toasty, man. Humidity's high. But what I usually do is try to get out on the front of the boat or something where we can have some airflow, throw that vest on, and then, if I can keep the sun off of direct skin, so I wear loose shirts, long sleeve shirts, a good hat, something just to keep the heat off. You know me, man, I love the tan. I love to be out there in the sunshine. I'm part lizard. But if I'm gonna be outside doing an activity like fishing all day, I avoid that direct sunlight.
Well, being a redhead, I've always tried to avoid the sun as much as I can because I blister so quick if I'm out and I'm not
Yeah,
paying attention. And like you said, I wear a big boonie hat, to keep the sun off of my eye or off of my bald head and off of my face. And I try to stay in the shade as much as I can. But being prepared with the new sun shirts that have
yeah,
the UV protection in it. And
right.
I also find that wearing the long sleeve sun shirts actually keeps me a little bit cooler. I'll have Beth kind of mist me down with a
Yeah.
light bottle of water and kind of get me cooled off that way. But wearing the long sleeves actually makes me feel cooler than if I'm in a t-shirt.
Man, I used to be the opposite end of that spectrum. I always thought, if I could wear a tank top or, something loose but light and, I never put the correlation together, just sheer sun on skin, how rapidly that does it until I was in the Marine Corps and we started going through that, and you're right. In the Marine Corps, we would go through these protocols. You wear gloves sometimes, you're wearing boonies, you're wearing neck gaiters, all these different things, and you would think, man, that would add heat. But if you look at folks that are nomadic that live in desert areas, they're wearing long stuff, a lot of thin cotton, linens that are lightweight that they can wick and let air flow, but there's no direct sun correlation that heats you up so much faster. And then,
Mhm.
like you said, you add a little bit of misting to it, it makes a big difference. And so we've had to do that just to learn to be in those arid environments to be able to stay out there on patrols longer. And you're right, it makes a huge difference.
And you had mentioned the neck gaiter. I've often wore the chamois kind of material, and we'll
Yeah.
take and dunk it in the ice cooler.
Ice water.
Yep,
Yeah.
ice water, get it really cold, and then put that on
Yeah.
the back of my neck. And that's another way to kind of cool down the body is we're pushing fluids and staying in the shade as much as possible. And we always have to worry about sunburn because I rarely wear shorts anymore because my tops of my knees will get burned really quick. We
Yeah.
don't feel it, we don't realize it, but if you have exposed skin, you definitely need your sunscreen, especially as a quad or somebody with, can't feel their skin.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. I try to keep like 4 or 5 of those cooling rags. And
Hmm.
so I'll stick one, at the beginning of the day in the very bottom of the cooler, throw some ice and some water and whatnot in there. And then just keep those rotating
Yep.
and, tuck it into my shirt and allow it to touch directly on my skin or whatever. Man, it makes a huge difference. Allows you to stay out there a lot more. And then, this sounds weird, but they make so many different colors now. If you're out and about and you want to color coordinate, and the only reason I bring that up is like we were at a concert, outdoor concert, and my daughter was like, "Hey man, that thing is really contrasting with what clothes you got on." And I joked around and I said, "Well, it really doesn't matter, but if you got professionals that are out there that are, somebody with a disability that wants to get back to work." And then they got certain, colors that they need to be wearing for whatever reason. Or you got social media influencers now that want to have certain. So all that to be said, they have them in multiple colors that if you needed it for that purpose, other than the cooling, they even have that would coincide. So, you're not going to be a big faux pas by having some bright pink with a yellow. You got
We stand out enough with the chairs that we like to kind of blend in sometimes with our outfits and be, more professional. And that type of technology, we can call it assistive technology, but really anybody in the heat that's out there could benefit from it. Like you said, it can color coordinate. You don't have to stand out. It doesn't have to be weird. It could be something that benefits everyone. And I think if more and more people tried it, they'd realize that it did cool them down just like it cools us down.
I know we had Jeremy Kerr on, and he was talking about a misting system. I ended up going back and getting one from I can't remember if it was Lowe's or Home Depot. Both of them have one that's similar, and so we can add this to the link. But you take a 5-gallon bucket, add just a little bit of water, throw in some ice cubes, and then this is just a fan that runs off of a rechargeable battery, and then you put it in the back of a tent or bring it in, on your pontoon boat, something like that with an awning, and just let it mist through. And all it does is drop the ambient temperature around for everybody. And so,
Nice.
if you've got a kid or somebody that's there, they're the same way. They're little heaters in themselves, and then they don't realize they're getting hot until they're hot.
Yep. Yep. Mike, you brought up a good point. We're talking about staying cool in the outdoors in the summer, and you're living in South Carolina. It's always hot down there. You're
Yeah.
putting in a new pond. That's coming along for you. How do you think cooling and canopies, and what's your plan to kind of keep the people that are visiting the Roar property that are going to
Right.
be fishing? How do you plan on keeping them cool?
Man, that's a great question, dude. And you're right. So the pond where we're at, it's in the middle of a pasture. Not a lot of we've got a lot of decorative trees that we put in, but none of them are right on top of the pond. So we've been looking at that. So we'll pop up some canopies, we'll pop up some tents right on the edge. What we also looking at is some of the triangular shaped awnings, the tents that they
Yep.
make. So now they've got them. Now you can set stakes in place, and we can retract them, bring them out, put them out when we want to use them, but then bring them down so that they have longevity. We can, store them and that kind of stuff. But then we're going to plant some decorative trees, just some stuff around there, some Japanese maples. And that's a long-term issue because they're not super fast growing. But we're going to add some things like that to try to do it. And then that's the reason why we put the deck on one side of the pond and then a pier that goes out into the water on the other so that we can try to, play the sun
Yep.
because just the amount of oak trees that we do have on the property, they're going to dissipate and allow some shade from different things. And then we'll probably have to do some more early morning fishing or late, afternoon fishing depending on the weather because you're right, it does get really hot here, very humid in the summer. And like you said, man, we're only in June. You get here in South Carolina in August, you really know what the heat's about.
Yeah, buddy, that gets a little warm down there for me. I'll be honest on that. I kind of got to stay in the air conditioning half the day, even here in PA, just because it affects my breathing. But
Yeah.
I like to get out as much as I can in the summer, early morning, early evening. Just be smart about it. And I know that people do a lot of activities outdoors in the summer. You want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the things that don't involve hunting, since we're not in hunting season, but in the outdoors. What are some of the things you like to do, Mike, or have done, I should say, even?
Yeah, you brought up one earlier, you guys were doing with the grandkids and stuff, and we did a little bit this weekend picking berries. I've got a buddy that's got a place. Funny enough, I joke around, he was in the Navy, he was one of the SEAL team guys, and then now he's Farmer Joe, and he's got 20 acres of just blueberries. And so
Wow.
him and his wife have gone into it, made it a really nice business, brought in blueberries, blackberries, muscadines, and then they turned it into a berry picking farm. And so it's something that's productive, that is financially bringing in some revenue for them. But then they open it up once the berries are getting so prevalent. You can only pick so many so fast because of dealing with the heat and other things.
Yep.
So they're doing it even at night. And berry picking, just getting out, getting on trails. I love getting out and taking the track chairs, or we're lucky enough, our permobiles, they'll do decent outside. They're not great, but they do okay. I just love being outside. But there's a ton of activities. Anything that you've done before your injury, pretty much other than walking, you can find a new workaround to be able to do it. I love hand cycling. I
Mm-hmm.
don't do it as much as I used to. Aging and laziness, if I'm being honest, it really gets in the way. And being able to transfer, I don't transfer as easy as I used to. But I love hand cycling. I love, again, hunt, fish. This time of year, you still got some predatory hunting. A little too warm for me to get out there and do that right now. But man, berry picking and just time outside. Funny enough, me and you kind of, both of us are in a different season in our life, and we both got grandkids. I had my grandson this weekend, and I think we went through about 200 water balloons, and he just wants to fill them up and throw them, man. So I'm all
Oh,
about making memories.
dude, that is the best day. I'd take that over just about anything. I agree with you, and I don't even mind getting hit with the water balloons anymore.
Yeah,
As long as they don't get my electronics too much, I'm all on board with it. You had mentioned about hand cycling and getting out on trails too. I
yeah,
know here in PA they have a really big rails to trails, where we took old railroad lines and made them into biking trails. And surprisingly, my wife and I will go on a lot of walks, and
yeah,
it's a like a crushed limestone, so it's very accessible, and I can do it in my permobil everyday wheelchair. And I've got the F5. It'll go up to 7 miles an hour. So if I need to scoot down the trail, ahead of her, or if she goes on ahead of me, if I'm stopped and looking at something, I can kind of catch up pretty quick. And you should
yeah.
see the looks I get sometimes, Mike, when I'm cruising in high gear down the trail. I'm almost jogging speed at 7 miles an hour.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I got the M3. In a truck, it won't get as fast as seven, but it's dang close. And my wife, she gets mad at me. I'm sure Beth is chewing you out over there. Slow it down or pick it up. And Michael's always doing that to me. But the good thing is I tell her to hop on the back if she needs to, if she gets tired. But South Carolina did the same thing. We have what they call the Swamp Rabbit Trail, and it was industrial parks, all that, and they were fed by trains. And so they took those up and they've really turned them into some really nice places that you can get out and about. And then, a lot of places will have farmers markets and all of that are right off of those trails. So you can really make a day of just getting out downtown in some of your local areas and being able just to see the the trail systems, and then there's always some kind of food truck or something that coincides with it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about hunting. It is about getting back outdoors and just finding things in your neighborhood that are going to allow you to be productive and have an outlet to get out of your home.
Absolutely. And, a lot of the state parks will do guided tours,
Hmm.
walking tours. And a lot of times they are accessible to a point. And if you have a track chair, any type of track style wheelchair, or if you have limited mobility, if you call and actually speak to the rangers and find out what the trail difficulty is, you may be surprised that you can go on these nature hikes where, they're pointing out different plants, different trees, things like that. And it can be very interesting to uh, be with everybody else, be with your family in the state park, and to take those tours. All it takes really sometimes is a phone call to find out how difficult the trail is and if it is accessible to wheelchairs or what have you.
The one of the things I've always loved, man, is education. Funny enough, my mom was bringing me some old documents, and then next thing I know, there's some of my report cards from elementary school in there, and I'm looking over my classmates and some of my teachers' notes and the comments on the back, and they're like, "Oh, Mike doesn't stay focused, or he needs some tutoring on his math skills or something like that." And here I am now in the PhD program. I fooled the teachers back then, but it was really more probably, of course, I'm an older guy, ADHD and all that stuff. I have a trouble focusing when there's so many other stimulus out there. And growing up in places like Hawaii, we always had a lot of geckos and mongoose. And, I was always more interested in the outside than I was classwork. All that to be said, you hit the nail on the head just a minute ago. You got botany, you got all these different things out there. And I love education and learning about flowers and learning about the bees and learning about all the stuff that's going on around me and how those things kind of the circle of life. But, you always have other activities too that you can get involved in. And it's about raising awareness. It's about raising education. Advocacy is always a continued push, no matter where you're at. And so find what works for you in your area, educate folks on what's going on around you, and then finding new ways to be able to do it. But I tell you something that's really got me lately, Greg, is I'm getting into more bird watching. And I
Yeah.
never thought I was going to be one of those guys, but I went and got a book on South Carolina birds because of the pond. And when I was down there, there was this yellow and purple bird landed I've never seen before. And so I'm like, man, I got to go figure this thing out. And so just buying a book and being able to scroll through, see what's in our neighborhood and what's kind of transient, what's flying in and what's not native to us, but is either traveling north or south. It's pretty cool.
It is really cool, dude. And educating yourself, the internet, we have access to everything in our phones at the drop of a hat. So I'm sure when you seen that bird, you looked it up on your phone,
Oh
found
yeah.
out found out everything there was to know about it. And that may, put you into another hobby of outdoor photography where you're taking pictures of the birds that visit the pond, maybe documenting it, sharing it with friends and family. There's so much adaptive tech, assistive tech for photography if people are into that in the outdoors. I mean, it doesn't always have to involve a rifle or a crossbow. Sometimes a camera is a lot more fun.
It's all about capturing that moment. I know you and I, we kind of, well, I'll just speak for myself. I get myself into trouble during hunting season, and I don't mean that in a negative realm, but I'm trying to hunt, call, shoot everything myself to be able to do it. We live in a social media world. We live in a world that we do have a computer at the drop of our hat. Our cell phones now have more capacity than some of the early guys going through NASA to be able to get to the moon. And that's no exaggeration when you just look at sheer processing capabilities. Our cell phones have more data and more speed and Wi-Fi and everything else to be able to go through than some of those early pioneers had in the space industry. And so there's always an opportunity to be able to figure out what's going on in and around you, and being able to research whatever animal you just saw, but being able to capture that moment real time. A lot of times, you get that. Well, I get it where somebody says, "Well, if you don't have a picture of it, it didn't happen."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I want to try to figure out how to do it all myself, record, shoot, capture the whole entire moment.
Mike, I was always kind of, we need a picture of it. We need to get it on video from the ground blind, everything. I wanted to share that experience with people. Okay. It wasn't about look at me, look what I'm doing.
Yeah,
But
100%.
I was on a hunt in Texas this one time, and I had an opportunity at a really nice buck, but he was moving pretty good. But I was on him and could have taken a shot. I was rifle hunting, and
Yeah.
the camera guy said, I wait, I don't have him yet. And brother, I will never make that mistake again. I'm a shooter, Mike.
Yeah.
When I got a good shot, when I have that opportunity, because as you know, you and I can't maybe get a second chance turning our
Yeah.
chair or waiting. So I'm a let's take pictures of it on the ground kind of guy anymore, not wait on the video. Now my wife she'll take video and take pictures in the ground blind, and she's awesome at it. But really, if she doesn't get the shot, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm taking my shot whenever I have the opportunity. I know that sounds kind of
No,
crazy, but as a
no.
hunter, sometimes we try to document stuff and try to get things on film, and we end up not tagging out because we miss the opportunity.
Well, dude, I know your heart. You're like me. It's not about kudos. It's about wanting to share the experience, what works, what doesn't work for you, showing people that there's a way to get out and do it. And that's why we do these podcasts. That's why we do a lot of blogging and other aspects. It's about raising awareness. So it's not a look at me moment. It's a, hey, this is what I do. This may not work perfectly for you, but you can tweak it to fit your needs, but it's available. But I'm like you, man, there's a fine line too. We get tied up, and one of my biggest pet peeves is now when we get together as a family, don't bring your cell phone to the table if
Yes,
we're going
sir.
to eat a meal. So, the technology is good. It's great to be able to document stuff that's going on. But sometimes our society has gotten so much into we're attached to that phone, we're attached to that piece of tech. And I'm big on, put that away for just a little bit and let's just make memories. Let's live in the now. And I'm not on a big hunting industry. I don't have to have all that footage to film, to have film time. And so I'm like you, if I get an opportunity and I'm having to adjust my chair, we'll worry about getting that picture when that animal's on the ground.
Yes, sir. And you brought up a really good point about, our cell phone usage. I've gotten to the point, Mike, where I put myself on do not disturb when I'm
Yeah,
in a family function.
yeah,
I want to kind of go back to the 80s sometime, and I'm out of the house. I don't have to hear that phone ring. And if it's important, they'll call back, they'll leave a message, what have you. But I've gotten to the point where I'm putting myself on do not disturb just so I can enjoy the weekend or enjoy the person I'm with and the time that I'm spending with them. Otherwise, you're always getting texts, you're always getting messages. It can be overwhelming sometimes on a weekend.
it can be overwhelming just in general. We live in a society now where everybody wants to be at somebody's beck and call, and we can, for safety purposes, for the majority of the time, get to calling somebody if we need them. It's opened up a great avenue for folks with disabilities. They can be more independent. They can search for stuff that they need to. They can find ways to get out and about. They're always got a way to get in touch with medical staff or whatever if they need to. But man, I'm an 80s kid too, and we lived in a different time. And so, we're the last vestige that didn't have cell phones. Growing up, we would go out and play and have a good time. I just needed to be in the house when the lights came on outside. And so if we can disconnect and not bring in extra stress, and unfortunately, a lot of these cell phones and all that add more stress. we love being outdoors. That's why we're doing the Accessible Hunter, Accessible Pursuits podcast. And it's about disconnecting, getting out, spending time in nature, and being encompassed in all that she has to offer. And that's the sight, sounds, and everything else. Turn that tech off sometimes, silence your phone, and just listen to the birds, bees, the animals, and the breeze of the trees, man. And that to me is more refreshing than it is sometimes doing the activity. It's just about being outside, taking a few minutes to get an extra breath.
That's an excellent point, Mike. We find our solace in the outdoors. We always say the outdoors is for everyone. We try to make it as accessible as possible. And if we're at a park, having a picnic with our family, if we're uh, rolling on a trail by ourselves, we don't need to be in constant contact from the outside in. We can choose to call people in an emergency or to be stayed connected, but from our perspective out, we don't always need to be bombarded with calls and text and notifications on phones and you know everything that goes with it. As you said, I mean, it's a blessing to have. It empowers us in so many ways, but we need to scale it back sometimes, especially in the outdoors.
Absolutely. And two, again, here I am soapboxing. We see so many folks, and it's sad. Our society is so fast paced. Everybody wants to be able to get in touch with somebody on a moment's notice with work or emails or text. And that's great. But at the same token, when you're at dinner, man, you can look around and see everybody at the table, I think are disconnected from their families just because, everybody's on a cell phone. Nobody's carrying on a conversation anymore. That's what I love about doing these podcasts is just being able to really get down to brass tacks and me and you do something that's becoming a lost art, and that's communicating. It's just carrying on a conversation, getting to know my brother and saying, what can I do to help refuel you? And I
Right.
think as a society, man, we need to be doing that more too, is just get back to a lost art of sitting around a campfire. I saw your face beaming when you were talking about Saturday and doing the summer solstice. And it's about being prevalent in that moment. It's about being persistent and chasing and being adamant that you want a relationship with the people around you and being able to share those moments. You may not always get those for a social media tag or being able to do it, but man, some of the best things in my life don't have a picture that coincides with it except for the picture that's in my mind of living in the moment.
Exactly. And, Mike, I didn't mention this before, but our neighbors, we had just met them 2 years ago when we bought the farm property. And already they've put a ramp. They built a ramp on under their deck so that I can get up for these type of
Right.
parties and campfires and things. I've known people my entire life, Mike, that
Yeah.
have not put ramps on their homes.
Hey,
If I want to come visit, my wife has to haul a 40-pound aluminum folding ramp. These are folks that I met 2 years ago, and they're building a ramp. Invite us to every picnic, every party they have, so that I can be around the campfire, that I can hear live music, I can
yeah.
celebrate any activity, I can celebrate the weekend with them, and that really made me just feel so welcome. And I don't know, just it boggles my mind that the outdoors are so much of my life. And when I don't get invited to something that's accessible or something that's easily made accessible, it kind of, devalues my self-esteem if I'm going to somebody's place all the time and they're not making an effort to make it accessible even a little bit.
Well, man, there's a lot of things that coincide with that, and I know you and I have had massive conversations over the years. You're right. It gets down to where you have an empathetic dialogue with somebody. You spend time, they get to know you, they see your needs. Those guys and girls, they see how cool you are, Greg. They want you at the party, and they've gone out of their way. Without going out of their way. They just saw a need, they facilitated the need, and they made it work. I'm like you. There's a lot of times that Michael has to trudge out these big ramps that we have, and I'm very grateful that we have them. But at the same token, now it's putting her carrying a 40 or 50 pound aluminum suitcase of a ramp just to
Yep.
be able to get into a family member's house. You're a family member. You would think that by now, I've been hurt 30 years, we would have figured out a better way to do this. So a lot of times, I go to other places that are already facilitating those needs, and I'm
Yep.
not killing my bride to do it just to be able to get in and out. And it's all about intentionality. So those folks already knew that they wanted you at the party, and so they were intentional about the relationship and inviting you in. Again, it's not about a handout. You're not asking for a handout from anybody, but just being able to find more advocacy realms and then being able to make things more accessible. That's why we're trying to develop the property the way we are. I don't want the rural property to be concreted everywhere. We just want it to be wheelchair friendly. And so
Yes.
not everything is going to work for everybody on the property, even though that we're a nonprofit 501(c)(3 run, the majority of our people are in chairs or have a physical disability. We're not going to concrete everything in. We're going to make it where Mother Nature kind of works with us and we work with her, but we're not going to be totally I don't want to say non-compliant, but we're not going to be totally a shepherd center where we have push button doors and
Right.
easy access. It's still nature. And so we
And,
want to be able to harbor that.
and as we say all the time, the outdoors is not ADA compliant. We're not looking to concrete everything. We're not looking for, push button doors. Uh, we want it to be accessible in a way that includes people and allows us to do things. And you and I always find a way to make that happen, whether it's hunting, fishing, just walking down a trail with our wives, we make it happen. And there's so much that the outdoors has to offer people with disabilities. As we said at the beginning of the podcast, anything you want to do, you can pretty much do. You just have to find a different way of doing it sometimes.
Yeah. And we've talked about this on several podcasts, track chairs and all of those things, man. Whether it's your Extreme 8 and the guys don't like to get beat up with the track device, there's other tech out there. And it's about being able to be very relevant in your own life. Every piece of equipment's going to need a little bit of tweaking to make it individualistic for you. But I love track chairs and being able to get back out. I love being able to take ours to the beach, and I can, with the rack on the back, I can load up a bunch of stuff. I can help my wife carry it if she gets tired or the beach sand's hot or whatever. She can stand on the back of the chair. I can help her get up and down through there. Again, we're able to go at a steady 5, 6 miles an hour with the track chairs. Not overly fast, fast enough when you're outside,
Right.
but at the same token, that is steady 5 or 6 miles for or 5 or 6 miles an hour for 6 miles before the batteries need to be charged. That's a long distance in that kind of terrain.
Yes, sir. And it gets you and your wife to the beach together. There's a few organizations up and down the East Coast that are giving track chairs to people to use free
Yeah,
of charge.
yeah,
It's Waymaker down by you guys, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
just such great organizations that if somebody's vacationing with their wife or family to the beach, they may not have the ability to haul a track chair. They may not have a track chair, and these
yeah.
501s are making that possible. You want to talk a little bit about that, Mike?
Man, I'm gonna tell you, I'm blessed. It's mind blowing. South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina is really going out of their way to try to figure this out. We got the Copeland Foundation over in Georgia. They're really pouring into it. They're working on the state parks. I know all up and down the East Coast, up your way, there's a lot of state park organizations that are trying to get track chairs. But we got Waymaker here, and Jacob and them have done a great job. He took something, becoming paralyzed from a fluke accident, and then turned that around into a passion where he's just harboring and pouring into people. where they went to where he got a track chair. He saw the freedom and the independence that it gave him. He wanted to be able to give more and more people an opportunity to try that. And so now they have about 28, 29 track chairs. They'll bring them to you absolutely free of charge, and you can keep them up to a week. They have them in different beaches and state parks here in South Carolina, the edge of North Carolina, and even a little bit in Georgia. But like I said, we got Cordell Jeter and those guys with Eco Rover that are trying to do the same thing, where he's developing wheelchair friendly track chairs. He's paralyzed. And so you got a guy that's paralyzed trying to develop a chair. And so there's a ton of tech out there. It's just, man, South Carolina and Georgia, I'm just blessed right now that that's right here in my backyard. And these guys are right down the street. So even our nonprofit, we have some track chairs, but I tell the guys, you're more than welcome to use them. But if I were you, I would just get in touch with Jacob and them because now you don't have to haul ours from the upstate and drive to the beach. We're blessed that where I live, I can be at the beach in 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I can be in the mountains in an hour. So I'm close to everything. But that tech's there and it's free. Use what you got where you got it. And man, get out there and enjoy it.
Dude, you said a mouthful on, you know, everything about accessibility today. We talked a lot about sports, about getting out with family, picking berries. It doesn't always have to be about hunting. You know, in the off season, there's always so much to do. And in future podcasts, we'll be talking about, you know, how we prepare for the season, some of the things that we
Right.
do right now in our downtime and our slow time. But the outdoors is just, to me, it's my happy place, you know. And if I get to share that with people, my friends, my family, and also I consider sharing this, you know, online, you know, to get people out, to motivate them. And no matter what you're doing, try to get outside, be proactive about the heat, make sure you're hydrating, doing everything safely. But I think we covered a lot today in the podcast, and I'll leave the final words to you.
Man, I appreciate everything you do, Greg, and it is about raising awareness. It's about being inclusive. It's about trying to just get somebody motivated, and sometimes that's self-motivated. I have to push myself a lot of times just to get up and get out. But the thing I love, I'm a foodie, and so I love getting out and about. So every weekend, I'm trying to come up with something. If we're not working on the property, if we're not planting something, or moving trees or trying to do something so that we can make it where it's a holistic opportunity when somebody comes out on our property. We want to make it where it's all encompassing, right? It's all inclusive. It's all a respite care. We're not just taking care of the person with the ailment or injury. We're taking care of their family. And so I want to kind of overload those sensories with flowers and you got the smells and you got the bees. I know you and Beth are doing bees now. Me and Michael went through a master's bee course, and it's about bringing more animals out, right? We're losing bees all the time, and then they do so much in nature. They're pollinators, but then they also allow that system to be a stronger, more dynamic system if we have all these creatures out there. So anyway, you're right. We've covered a lot of different things on this podcast, not a lot of it in depth. We've got a lot of time, hopefully, God willing, to be able to cover a lot more. But it's about just get out of your head and home. Find those things that are in your area, share them, tweak them a little bit, but then make sure that you bring in other folks in chairs or their family members out and about and just sharing whatever's going on in nature. It's a beautiful opportunity just to be outside. Let's just get out and do it.
That's well said, brother. Well, folks, that's it for the podcast today. We appreciate you listening, and thanks so much.